It's amazing to be here tonight. Woodville is really an example of something that we should be seeing all across the country. I was here with Dr. Chris Schumer last week, and sitting there with him, he said during the American Revolution, the people met in churches, taverns, and barns. And he really, I'm like, okay, I'm writing that one down. That's something that is a message that really needs to get out there at this time. So a little bit about me. I grew up in a small town in Ontario. I spent my first 4 years in a jungle village of New Guinea and came back to Canada and really wondered what my dad meant by Canada as a country of freedom and democracy. And as I grew up in that small town and got to see, homelessness and a lot of the issues that we see in our small towns, I really wondered about if where we are at as far as government and the way that we organize our countries is truly the last great step for governance. And I think that we are on the precipice of, if anyone here has read Henry David Thoreau's essay on the duty of civil disobedience, he spoke about at the end how there would be a time when we would move forward into a new age of governance that would be worthy of the respect of conscious and self-governing citizens. And what's happened throughout this entire agenda that has really come to a head through the pandemic and COVID times is it brought together the salt of the earth. It brought us together. And now we have an opportunity to actually really get organized and band together and start to govern ourselves in a way that will set an example for the rest of the world. And really the only time that a government has successfully been, I'll use the word overtaken or replaced, is when the people gather together and they form their own government of the day that will eventually replace that government. So I went to the Convoy. I was arrested on the front line of O'Connor. I ended up testifying at the public order inquiry with Chris Deering, the veteran, beside me. That was the Rouleau Commission. And I got to meet a lot of the organizers of the original Convoy. And after that, went on to do many different events. And because I lost contact with so many people during the Convoy, people that I didn't want to lose contact with, I came up with a system of when I go to an event, simply opening up the notes on my phone, writing the name of the event. As I make connections with people, I say, hey, can I get your contacts? And I'll put their name in my notes, and then I'll take a picture. And I will send them that picture, and it helps me to take up the conversation where I left off, and I'll send them my information. So it really streamlined the process of connecting with people and following up on those conversations. And from that, so even before the Convoy started, like I said, I've always been kind of wondering about democracy and government and why it isn't working for us. And I've always been very active in it. I actually ran in a federal election in 2011 for the Canadian Action Party. They're a party that its main pillars were based on sovereignty, monetary reform, civil rights. And I really wanted to present that to my local people out in Terrace, British Columbia, and that riding. So that's where I spent 10 years of my life and had my kids. And through that process, because I think for several reasons, but speaking about monetary reform is not something that they necessarily want aired in public. And because of my family background, we've always been involved in our community. For whatever reason, the societies that are operating behind our town, and when we drive into any town in this country, there will be a board and it'll list the clubs and the societies that are operating in that town. Those clubs, those organizations, they are the ones that are making all of this happen behind the scenes in our town. They are meeting behind closed doors, and they are deciding who is going to get elected and how they're going to win that town, the townspeople to favor with that with those candidates. And they do that through community service projects. Anyway, so during that election, I really came to understand that these societies are operating behind the scenes. And what I see the Freedom Family as now is a society. We just call ourselves a Freedom Family, but we don't recognize that we're actually members of a new society and that we just haven't organized effectively yet across this country and in our own small towns as individuals. And this is what we're up against. We need to simply organize ourselves more effectively in our towns. So from that, I've done, like I said, quite a few events. I even went to Mexico to a conference called Anarchapulco and met with hundreds of people from across the world that are part of the parallel society. There is a parallel society that fully exists, but it's a bunch of puzzle pieces that hasn't been put together yet. And one of the ideas I have, and it's already been done, is let's get all these organizations into one place and we can join them. And as I go about my solution process in my mind, I always am asking, has this been done yet? And sure enough, it has. So there's a website called Freedom Rising, and it lists all of the organizations in Canada that are working on our side of things. So we have listed there Veterans for Freedom, Police on Guard for Thee, Stand for Thee, Frontline Nurses, all of them. There's hundreds of them listed there. And if your organization isn't there, you can go and you can sign up and have it listed there. And what I'm telling all the people that part of our movement across the country is to simply pile into the parallel society. Join one of these organizations, join a couple. If you're interested in law, join Stand for Thee. If you're a retired veteran or interested in helping the veterans, join these organizations. If you're a nurse, join an organization. That would be one simple thing that we can do. For instance, if we get more members in Veterans for Freedom, for instance, than Canada's Standing Army, which is only 40,000 members in the Standing Army of Canada, plus 30,000 reserve. We have more freedom fighters in Canada than that, and that would make a statement, right? So that's just one idea, and then we can start to have meetings in our hometowns. So when I went through my contact list, I'm from Peterborough, okay? Actually, I'll backtrack a little bit. My most recent trip was out to the East Coast. There was the Atlantic Freedom Festival, and I was able to go out there with Dr. Shoemaker and Freedom George and Colin Big Bear. And I showed them my networking strategy and how simple it was. And by the end of it, we got 300 names. And the thing is about these events, they're very well done. We as freedom fighters, we know how to put on a festival. We know how to have a good time. We know how to do the speeches and the music and everything and have a bonfire. And we're really good at that. But behind the scenes, a lot more can be happening to make us a lot more productive and effective. For instance, people came there and they didn't know who else came from their area. They might not even have met them. So there's some simple things that we can do. And when I go to these events, I take some time to sit down and I really write out, how could this be more effective? So I'm putting all these ideas and protocols onto a server that I can share with organizers from across the country, and they're welcome to reach out to me if they're doing events or anything like that. And we can start to streamline our efforts all across Canada, because Canada is a vast nation. We are too spread out. We cannot do what the UK and France is doing. We cannot show up at our capital by the millions on a day's notice. We can't do it. We have to organize in our municipalities. And really that's where the battle is being fought. In the 1990s, the UN signed a deal and basically bought out our mayors and changed it so that they would be able to implement all of this stuff. And we can really see it coming to a head now. So it's in our municipalities that it really matters, and that our efforts need to be, that's where our energy needs to be directed. And I'm all about using our energy for things that are effective and that are dealing with the actual problems that we have. We're actually going up against what I call a two-headed snake. And these clubs and organizations that are operating in the towns, that's what we need to get to in order to deal with the bigger problems that are afoot. One is monetary issues. When a country loses control of its currency and credit, it doesn't matter how we vote, okay? The country's lost. And that already happened in 75, and that needs to be dealt with. And the other one is the legal system and some things going on there that we all need to be better educated on, because there's a reason why there is no justice in this country. So I really like what Stand for Thee is doing. I also believe it's really important that we understand when it comes down to the law, how these changes were made and why we're now basically dealing with a de facto government and how they did that through their laws. So I'll back off that one for now. So going back to what can we do now? Okay, so now I've got all these ideas together. I've put together the contact list for the East Coast, and I'm getting them connected and working with them to implement certain strategies. But I'm not just going to tell people how to do it. I'm going to do it in my hometown and really beta test things in my hometown. And as I do that, continue to work with people from across the country, because now I'm getting calls from across the country on how we can do this. How can we set up a parallel society? How can we set up a society in our own town? How can we basically get organized? So we're having town hall meetings. You know, it's amazing, the power of the people. We actually, each one here has so much potential. Who here has run or sat on a board meeting? You can just raise your hands. So that's a skill. That's a very needed skill. We need people who understand how to organize a meeting, plan an agenda, and actually plan an agenda that when we come together, we're focusing on the key issues and not getting sidetracked. Because there's a lot of psyops that are happening right now, and they're taking our time, they're taking our energy, they're dragging us here and there every weekend to deal with things that can be dealt with in a more effective way, okay? And so when I go through my contact list for Peterborough, and I've networked more outside of Peterborough than inside, and I go through my contact list and I realize I know 100 people, good people in this town that know what's going on, that have been involved at some level or another. And I get a hold of those people, and they know 5, 10, 15, 20, 100 people, some of them, because some of them are key organizers in that town, right? And when we actually think about it, we have the numbers to make a difference in our towns and cities. We have the resources. We have people with properties that we can use for gatherings. We have people with businesses that we can support, and that can be a place of distribution for different things, from Druthers to other ideas that I have. We have people with expertise and knowledge and the ability to plan and be strategic. We have people who know how to do a press release. We have people already doing petitions and going to the council meetings. So now we just got to get the 1,000 people in our town on an email list and get them notified as far as this is what the town is doing this month. We're doing this at the council. We're having this rally. We're doing this petition, we're giving this notice of liability, and we get people to rotate and start showing up so it's not the same people all the time. And I really think that that's what we need. We need the people out there who are needing hope need to know that there's a plan. They need to see some organization, and that's what we loved about the Convoy. Just the road captains alone from each province gave me so much hope. It was like somebody is representing and leading from this town. A simple trucker is all it took to get the people to go behind it. And that's what we need, is hope. And the only way we can have that hope again is if we actually have a plan and we go across the country with it. And then I also wanted to talk about, how much time do I have? Okay. I also wanted to talk about how we can make our rallies and our events and our council meetings and our petitions more effective. So as I've spoken to many people and they've shared many ideas, a lot of these ideas aren't original to me. It's just I'm kind of being a sounding board and a filter, and I'm just bringing them into my head and putting them out to everyone, okay? So there is a man up north, and he was very successful with his hometown in doing press releases. So what he did when he had events and did petitions and convoys in his area, he did a press release, and he wrote it and he sent it to his local papers. And this is a lot easier to do if you're in a small town. If you have a small town paper, they're like just dying for some news to show up for and take a picture of and stuff, right? So, and especially if you word the press release in a certain way, in a certain tone, what ended up happening with him is they printed it word for word. He wrote the script and they printed it. The other thing he did is he asked for a meeting with his mayor. The mayor didn't want to meet with him. He said, okay, well, there's a few projects you're doing that I really agree with. I'd like to talk to you about that. And so he met and he started just having a relationship with the mayor on a friendlier basis, right? And by a few months went by and he had a Freedom Festival up north. This is Elliott Lake. So they're doing another one this year. Highly recommend going. And the guest speaker ended up being the mayor. The mayor had done a complete turnaround, saw that these guys were actually good people, and he ended up speaking at the event. So we can really make a difference in the small towns of Canada, okay, all across the country. And the other thing that happened is the chief of police in that area and the local policeman also sat down and had lunch with him, and they went over basically creating a rapport with the police, and it was a good thing. So there are ways that we can get through to our media, our local government, and our police organizations, especially in the small town. So these are just some ideas on how we can be a bit more effective in our strategy. I honestly have a hard time showing up for rallies at this point that don't have a press release going out and who aren't emailing their local mayor and town council and notifying them that there's even a rally. Okay, up until now, I've been more than happy to go because I like networking and I like meeting like-minded people. And that's what I do. So, but at this point, we do really need to be more organized and effective and take these ideas across the country. So with that, if anyone has any questions for me, I do have a